In 2020, because of COVID-19, traveling is out, but there's no reason you can't meet old and make new friends at an Agile conference. The Scrum Master Toolbox podcast teamed up with Tom Henriksen to organize the 4th year of the Agile Online Summit, and you can attend for free. There will be networking events, lots of talks on important topics, and 8 amazing keynotes from Mary Poppendick to Alan Holub, Jeff Patton, who's the creator of User Story Mapping, Neil Killick, who's a no estimates pioneer, Jeff Watts, author of Scrum Mastery, a great book for Scrum Masters, Jeff Gotthelf, Bob Galen, and our very own Markus Hammarberg, who's the author of the Bungsu Story, a great Agile transformation story. You can get your free tickets at bit.ly/SMAOS 2020. All lowercase, all one word. Once again, bit.ly/SMAOS 2020. All lowercase, all one word, and the link is also on the show notes. You can get your free ticket or opt for the full digital access that lets you keep all the conference videos forever. And for example, organize Agile learning sessions at work by watching those videos. You can get the full digital access at bit.ly/SMAOS 2020. But don't forget, there will be lots of live networking events, so I'll see you at the conference floor. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special bonus episode with Stephen Parry. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's so nice to see you.
Likewise.
It's been a while. Yeah.
It has been a while. So Stephen and I have not been traveling so much because of the Corona situation. We used to meet at conferences, but obviously not so often anymore at this time.
I know, and I think that was the highlight of these conferences, is meeting people afterwards, especially over a meal and a drink or two. I miss that.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. So Stephen is cited as one of the top 25 consumer experience influencers in 2019-2020 by the Consumer Experience magazine. He's also a multi-award winning business leader, strategist, and author of the acclaimed Sense and Respond, The Journey to Customer Purpose. And finally, he's the managing director of the Sense and Adapt Academy for developing change designers and change makers to create adaptive organizations. We're going to talk a lot about both purpose and adaptive organizations in the episode today. But Stephen, in a conversation on LinkedIn, you shared that you have been working with teams on the issue of purpose for many years. So I'm curious, what's the biggest problem you see teams facing in that regard?
I think most purpose statements are very dry and uninspiring, or very much the same the world over. And they usually represent just the business aspect of it. And I think there are multiple purposes for the existence of the organization. And what is often left out is the purpose of the work itself and the people that do the work and the environment and what we are trying to create for the customers. A purpose statement is to be first, number one in a particular field, doing X, Y, and Z for our customers. But that is not going to get people out of bed. And
especially if it's all about what we do instead of the impact that has.
Absolutely. So I thought a lot about purpose. And in my first book, which was in 2005, I dominated that book about understanding customers' purpose and understanding their world, and then delivering outcomes into that world, not necessarily products and services. It's what they do with them. So that was a start of a shift. But since 2005, I realized that people inside the organization needed to have a personal purpose for teams and how they work together and what they can expect of each other and what they can expect of management in order to achieve that purpose. So I ended up with a purpose statement which combines what is the customer's business or activity, the reason they're using your products, and it's not because of an application or it's not because of IT, it's because of they've got a business to run, for instance. The employees come to work for a particular reason. There's a purpose other than obviously to earn money and live. There are other ideals, and therefore they need to have an environment in that business, which is created predominantly by managers, to actually help them flourish and achieve all of those. So there's what really creates purpose is when you have a good combination of these three points of view that combine into one common purpose. And unless you have that, you don't get the best out of people, you don't get the best out of the organization, and you always shortchange the customer.
So you mentioned three. I want to recap that because I think it's very important. As you know, as agile coaches and scrum masters, when we think about purpose, we typically talk about maybe product vision or the purpose for the team. But you're talking about what's the customer's purpose, and it's not to use your product. Obviously, it's to do something that your product might help them to do.
Yes.
Then the employee's purpose or the team we work with. Why are they there beyond, as you said, surviving, making money, and also the purpose of the business where we work. What's that business's purpose, right?
Yes. And it's only when you combine those can you get to make judgments about what work you do day in, day out. I have a phrase which I say, look, purpose defines value, and value defines meaningful work, and everything else is waste.
And I think that's a great way or a great phrase to come from you, because some people might not know, but Stephen has been very active for many years on Twitter, and his handle is Lean Voices.
Yes.
How did you come up with that handle?
How I came up with it was basically I wanted to have a discussion group, and it was going to be for a number of people. But I never got it off the ground because work gets in the way and other things. And it was supposed to be a discussion group of maybe 4 or 5 people. And we would take the topics of the day and discuss those. Well, I never managed to put that together. So the name Lean Voices has just been applied to me, but I'm not the only voice in Lean. And I don't just do Lean. I've had that handle for many, many years. And it's hard to get rid of a new one and get the followers to come across.
No, that's true. But it's also in your personality, right? You said purpose defines value, value defines meaningful work, and everything else is waste. That is a phrase I would expect from somebody who's got Lean in their background.
I think the legacy of Lean on what I do is applied in everything I do, whether I'm looking at Agile, whether I'm looking at Six Sigma, whatever else I'm doing. And that is becoming because anything that doesn't achieve value is by definition waste. And everybody thinks they understand what waste is, but they don't, okay? Because the value defines what waste is. It's the opposite of value. And people think they can define waste. They go up and define waste. Oh, that's waste, that's waste. But what are they measuring against? You have to measure it against value. And that's the purpose. And this is why I call the book the Sense Respond book, the journey to customer purpose, because it's finding out what the customer's purpose really is, and then creating a clear line of sight between customer purpose and everything that you do. And if there isn't that clear line of sight, it breaks down.
So you said something, I'm going to take that and turn it all the way up to 11. So you said that waste is defined by value. You can't find waste if you don't know what value is. So Now coming back to purpose, obviously, you have seen a lot of waste in purpose creation and the use of the concept of purpose out there in the work that you have been doing. And we talked a little bit about what that value might be. So considering those 3 perspectives, the customer, the employee, and the purpose of the business where we work in. But how have organizations, once you start working with them, before you've had a chance to have an impact, how have they created purpose before that?
The traditional way that I would say about the traditional approach is it's almost like waterfall purpose. You have a bunch of well-meaning managers going off somewhere,
probably a very expensive resort
for a long weekend. Yes, and they try their best, but they're putting in whichever way they look at it, they're putting the management interpretation of a purpose of somebody else's purpose as well. And that doesn't work. You have to get the purpose from the people who are benefiting from that purpose. And there are different constituents. So the common way of doing this is they come up with a purpose, then having agreed this, they come out, and then it's cascaded through the rest of the organization. And what happens is they come out with this well-crafted piece of writing, but it doesn't touch, move, and inspire anybody. They go, well, that's what I expect, but I don't do anything different now. There's nothing in there for me. That is all about the business, and it's very little about the customer. The customer's an afterthought, and so are we. So it never satisfied. And I prefer looking at the different constituencies. There's the business. It has a purpose to create wealth because that sustains jobs. Okay, that's absolutely critical. So we have to achieve that to give us a mission. But then we have to satisfy the needs of the people that are coming to work. Why do they come to work beyond just sustenance needs? And both of those can only survive if they're really creating long-term value, which leads to long-term profitability, if they understand the customer's true purpose. And it's not about the products and services. It is the outcomes for that business, and I'm talking mostly business to business now, of understanding what the outcomes are for that client. And in IT, we can show this very well. You might have, I work a lot in outsourcing and in internal IT departments. And what I find in IT and application support and applications development is there is very little understanding of the customer's world. There may be some understanding of the requirements for the piece of technology you have to create and maintain, but what that does in the real world for that real customer is very difficult to get a grip on. And I wanted to put that firmly in there because you have to achieve delivery to the customer and outcomes, whether that outcome in using your products and services, they get differentiation in the market, whether they increase their market share. We're talking about business outcomes, and can we make them more competitive in their space? And once you open that conversation, you can now are free to choose and develop a bigger range of products, services, and technology to meet that bigger purpose. So the field is much wider open, and you can find niches where nobody else is operating.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. It often reminds me, like what you just said, which is one of the things I struggle with when I work with clients, to get across that if we don't have that purpose, if we don't have the understanding of how we help somebody else succeed, at the end of the day, all we can do is what I usually call to be a shopping list manager, right? We get shopping lists from all kinds of stakeholders, and then our role is just to kind of fine tune the priority between those things, which most often have little or no impact.
Yes, absolutely. People will shop around for things that the customer has pain points for. All right, so it's almost you have to have a predefined product that they go shopping for. Here we're talking about there's an engagement, a deeper understanding with your clients at a level that you can identify areas that they can change their business with your help. I characterize this with a very simple saying. The traditional organization makes and sells products. Okay, and they define themselves in that make and sell way. The make and sell organization defines themselves by the products and services they create. Whereas a sense and adapt organization doesn't define themselves by the products or services. They define themselves by the value they create for the customer, leaving them free to experiment, which is good in Agile and in Scrum, with all sorts of new ways of creating value. And that's what will differentiate you from your competitors, because you become a trusted advisor. You know more about the client's business than they do, and you know more about how to make the client's business really sing.
So you said something that I want to explore further. I know you have a story to share. When we were doing the prep for this yesterday, you shared that story of that large city IT organization. The
Hmm.
phrase you used was, a sense and adapt organization defines themselves by the value they create. I love that. So, but illustrate that with that story. I think it's a brilliant story of what that means in practice, and what kind of transformation happens when organizations start to see themselves as a sense and adapt organization.
Yes. So this brings us back to this purpose, because to shift that, we've really got to examine purpose. And what I would say to my biggest tip here is, whenever you're asked to make a significant change in your business, whether you're bringing teams together, whether introducing new technologies, or whatever it is use the opportunity to rethink, are we still on purpose? Do we need to repurpose? Don't blindly take this project and say, this is what we got to put in place. Because all that does, it makes the old world go better. When there's an opportunity to expand your horizons, that's why I think this type of purpose is better in a change, because you can really get a grip. And I'll explain this in a second. We were called in by a local authority of a big city in Britain. And this was the applications support, network support, and the whole stack of IT for this city council. And in a council, it's very political, because you have the elected members, all the different parties. You have the press on you all the time, looking at whether you're spending the money correctly. And it is obviously very political. So it's very difficult to get some direction in there. And the IT and applications guys were always switching, because political motives would change, different emphasis, different projects. So they were just being pulled apart, and they could never get anything where they could get traction on. So within a day, this team of 8 people came up with the purpose. And I think when I read this purpose out, it is wordy, yes, because it was the final attempt that they got at getting what they wanted to say. Later on, they wordsmithed it, but I think the first version really emphasizes what the issues that these guys were facing and why they couldn't deliver value. And as I'm reading this, I want you to just imagine what the atmosphere was like in this place for them to have to get to a point to state this purpose, because this is what they wanted to be, because this was not what they had today. And it goes like this, all right? And there's a structure in this, which I'll explain a little bit later. So we were going to embark on this change, a significant change. So I said, what is the purpose of this change? And we discussed it. And we came up with this with the final version. This is, our purpose is to enrich, support, and protect the lives of the citizens of our city. These are the IT and application and network guys. Okay? We do this by creating applications and an IT department that encourages opportunity, learning, and growth in a safe environment where established ideas can be challenged, and which engages, recognizes, and support the willing contribution of staff. To do this, we must all be honest, committed, and inspiring. Okay, so now the scope of the change work moved out, which instead of saying we are looking at what the council members need in terms of their applications and IT support and devices, because we went over the workers in the council, we went over the executive into the environment of the city that had chronic inner city problems. And they, for years, had lots of investment in IT and applications that never really resulted in changes outside in the real world, because the work was showing we were only satisfying the staff. All the members of the council, they were supporting those on the assumption that they were supporting the outside world, and it turned out they weren't.
That's actually one of the things that I want to focus on in this conversation. You said the work they had done in the past had not created change
No.
on the outside world.
No.
And I think that perspective, I think from my point of view, as I look at the teams that I've worked with, very often I have struggled with this problem. I never put words to it, but it was exactly this problem, is that teams very often come to me and they want to be agile, or they want to be more productive, or they want shorter time to market, whatever they are, those requests. And I always struggle with this, that actually that's probably not what's going on. And I couldn't put my ideas or thoughts or feelings into words, but that's exactly how I've experienced, is that very often the change impetus, the reason for change, comes from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be faster or whatever, but there's no reason, no purpose on the outside.
Correct.
And very often what happens is, and I'm sure you have seen that in your career a lot, is that the processes change. People still are unhappy, still want whatever was that they want, but couldn't verbalize it in any other way. And they never actually looked to the outside world.
Yes. We did some similar work with some police forces, and they created a very similar purpose. It was about the citizens. And when they looked at the IT goals and the application support goals and the network goals, they were all about uptime and all those, not about changing. Do they support the police officer in executing their duty? Does it keep the police officers safe? Does it keep the citizens safe? Okay. And we found when we were working with the police forces that in the name of cost cutting and efficiency, that really critical parts of that line of sight with the outside world were being cut off, and criminals weren't being prosecuted in time, such as motorists that were driving without insurance and things like that. They weren't prosecuted because they couldn't get the paperwork to the courts in time. These have very profound impacts on society. And they came back after understanding that linkage wasn't there and said, none of these goals that we have help the police force achieve the policing objectives. None of them. They were all about efficient IT and keeping it going.
Yeah, so they were like inside looking goals rather than outside
Yes.
or service centric looking goals.
Yes.
Now, of course, when we work with teams, there's the issue, like, where do we get started? Because defining a purpose, I think we've heard it from your stories and your explanations, that it can help align business teams and, of course, value. So value for the ultimate benefiters of the work that we do. But when we start to work with teams, and that's maybe something you can help us as Scrum Masters, is like, where do we start? Like, how do we start having that conversation? How do we help the teams talk about purpose in those three perspectives that you shared with us? And also, as we were just discussing, looking to the outside world.
Yes. I'll just come back a little bit here, because whenever you're asked to make a change, if you're a Scrum Master or you put in a team together that was going to maybe change a department in some way, I would always default to say, what is the purpose of this change? Is it doing anything for outcomes for customers? And if it's not, you have to ask yourself, well, is this the right change? Well, no, there's no value in this for the customer. Then says, so what's the value for the business? Okay, well, maybe faster to market and cheaper. Okay, I can understand why you would want that, but that on its own is not going to do anything unless there's an outcome for the customer anyway. You're just keeping your costs down. And then, is it making a difference to the lives of the employee? Is it making the workplace a better place to work? And I always judge whether a change has worked, whether it's delivering more value to the customer and improved the ability of the employees to serve the customer better and to make their managers successful to achieve their goal of go-to-market and reducing costs. So you have these different constituencies. And by the way, you only have one real customer, and that's outside, okay, for anybody who's tied up about who the customer is. And It comes down to just sitting down and saying, this is the change, this is what business wants. Okay, now we can do this in a way that just delivers what the business wants in terms of its traditional stuff. Or we could do it in a different set of way with the same amount of effort that creates more value and insight about the customers and creates a better place to work. So which one do you want? Because the other two come free. Okay, and that creates the alignment. Each of these purposes have customer in terms of business outcomes or consumer outcomes, the employee and the business, and the management role in that is to integrate that by creating the right environment. And let's just talk about employee purpose. We heard in the last purpose statement how the employee was feeling, that it was fragmented, they had no direction, they were jumping around, and most of the time they were reporting the project as being okay, and they knew it wasn't okay. So it didn't achieve its goals, but we said it sort of did by counting something else. And that's why they have to put in their statement, we have to be open, honest, and trustworthy, okay? Because it definitely wasn't. So coming to the employees, what particularly in tech, they want to contribute with their skills and be fairly rewarded in an environment that it creates trust, challenges, and allows them to develop. Now, it doesn't fit everybody, but I think it speaks to most technical people because their kudos comes from the technical things they master and their colleagues' view of that. But if you can harness that need to be seen as good in this by your colleagues, and if you can harness that for the benefit of the external customer and for the business, you get all three. And that's what makes change successful when you're focused on all three. And I've got a purpose here from a large IT organization where they talked about the customer's purpose, and they were buying large enterprise systems. And the customer's purpose was not, we just buy this to reduce my cost. What the customers were saying was, I want this technology to strengthen my business in a way that differentiates me from my competitors and provides a return on my investment. And the business purpose in that was they were providing expertise and services to enable them to produce, sell, and support software by creating and running a robust, effective IT solutions. But where those solutions comes from understanding the customer and the engagement of your staff to find out. So those three purposes are enough to start, okay? And it'll be different in different situations. It might even be different to different client groups instead of one size fits all. So that helps you really hone your services into what different customer groups need. Rather than one size doesn't fit all right, doesn't fit anybody, really.
Yeah, when you try to cover everything with just one, you end up missing very important aspects of all the others, of all the three.
Yes, absolutely, and under the terms of economies of scale. But what we're talking about here is economies of scope, of the diversity that we can create systems and processes that can be tweaked to various client groups to achieve different objectives for different clients. And therefore, you need to become a trusted advisor.
So would it then, if I'm thinking about this as a Scrum Master, would it then be a good approach to, first of all, start by talking about the three purposes, explaining that they are indeed different, but they need to be aligned. Otherwise, there's a problem with either selling or keeping the costs down or even keeping the employees in the company to continue to produce the services and products. Right? So we talk about the three. We explain why the three are important. But then what next? Like, how can a Scrum Master really help? I mean, if I'm working with a team, the first objection that comes to my mind is, I can only talk about the employee's purpose. It's beyond the team to talk about the consumer or customer's purpose or the overall business, right? Because that's, executive leadership that is going to talk about that. So I'm a Scrum Master. How do I take those concrete steps to start to socialize the idea and have an impact on taking on those concepts and applying them in my team?
Yes, I think you give a very good synopsis of the problem. All right, so how did they get to that position that they don't know? That's the first question. Okay, so they are disenfranchised from the customer. They have a job to do. They're in the back end with the factory. You just need to produce this. You just do your busy, bang, bang work, and out will come something, and we make money on it. Not realizing what it really does in the real world. Now, this isn't the same for all companies, but it is for a lot. And that is a very simple way of doing this. You just arrange to talk to some clients. You just say, we produce your software. Your product managers are engaged with this all the time. Get the product managers to take several of the team out and say, hey guys, the guys would like to understand a little bit more about your business because they're producing all of this stuff, but they'd really like to know how you're using it and, what are your business issues and how can they get more involved in understanding what you're doing. Now, the customers usually love that because that's just think of that message it sends to the client. You've got the guys who are making the code and all these other jobs or doing the testing out there with real customers. Now, it doesn't have to be all the customers, but some key customers. Okay.
Or if you're working in the consumer business, you can literally go outside the door and start talking to people.
Yes, absolutely. So you bring that knowledge in and you make sense of it. But the hardest thing is you have to go beyond seeing your product and service. You have to see what value you are creating for the customer. And if it's a meager value, say, well, what else could we be doing? What are the opportunities here? And that's a very different conversation.
Absolutely. At bringing the customer to the conversation in an effective and practical way, like perhaps collaborating with the product owner, joining the support teams, listening in on calls, whatever that might be, like some practical aspects will help us bring the customer purpose to the conversation at least.
Yes. And you can ask this whole series of questions, such as, tell me about your business. How do you go about it? What are your greatest challenges at the moment?
A very powerful question, always.
Who are your main competitors? Okay. And so what sort of goals have you got for the coming year? And that's very interesting. So once you understand the goals that they have as a business, then you can start saying, well, maybe those goals for this customer we should adopt. So we're saying whatever our products and services should be designed in a way that helps them achieve their goals. When you first see this, you can't see a connection into new types of value, but you have to understand what those goals are and then start thinking, when I build a product, is it helping achieve that goal? And the success of your product is defined by their business goals, not whether it met the specification, because everybody can meet the specification.
The success of your product is defined by your customer meeting their business goals. That is
correct. And this is what I call is the goal acquisition. So let me just go back to that big company, and when they talk to their customer, why they were buying these products. And it said, this is a summary of that. It said, I want you to strengthen my business in a way that differentiates me from my competitors. That's why I buy your software. Not because it's software, but it allows me to differentiate. That's what I want. And it provides a return on my investment. Okay. So now what does that do for the people that design those products? They've now got a slightly different objective rather than doing something functional. Okay. The interesting thing is, on those three purposes that I read out earlier, the business purpose, the employee purpose, and the customer purpose, they are enough for you to work with those three. Over time, you can craft something. And they crafted this about 6 months later, after working on those three and integrating them. And they came up with a new statement. which any one of those people, either the customer, the employees, or the business managers, would agree with. Every syllable. Not this is the customer purpose, this is employee, this is the business. No, it's the one statement that the three can take a view on and agree with it. And it was this. Remember, this is now the common purpose, is common to customers, the business, and the employee. And it says, with pride, we relentlessly pursue and apply our insight, ingenuity, and technology to create wealth and a secure future. And that now is a common objective for all of them. And then what you do is say, well, what is the contribution of everything that we do to achieve that purpose? What's the contribution?
You create a little bit like a benchmark to kind of check everything new against,
yes.
Right?
And this takes you forward.
And there's one thing in the process that I think it's good to highlight, is that it's not what the phrase ends up being, but it's the fact that the people who created it are the people
yes.
who need it. It's
yes.
not given to them, as you said, waterfall purpose style from up above. It is what they are feeling they should be focusing on.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's always a lot more powerful, if nothing else, in terms of commitment.
Yes, absolutely, because it all talks about secure future. Now, you imagine an organization that had built that capability and had that. I'm not talking about any values here. There's value statements are okay, but this is purpose. Is what purpose are we putting all those values for? All right. Ultimately, it's to create wealth and secure future for everybody.
And now you can easily say, okay, for everything that comes in, taking the what is not value is waste phrase into account, is everything that comes in, is it help securing our future?
Yes.
How?
Or one or more of those three purposes.
Correct.
But you got to have a balance between them. But very often we get that balance wrong. We usually get the business purpose being dominant.
And there's only one typically.
Yes.
And of course, that means we have two other very, very big blind spots. Stephen, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Unfortunately, we're getting close to the end. But before we do go, where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
There's a link straight to the Sense and Adapt Academy on my website, which is called senseandadaptacademy.com. That'll take you straight to the approach that I have within the Sense and Adapt Academy, which is about creating change makers and change leaders and helping managers adopt new ways of working. Because if a business is continually changing, you need to know how to manage a continually changing and evolving business. It's not a steady state business. And managers need some retraining to do that. The other area that you can pick up on some information, I've now launched a new YouTube site. Is called Adaptive Business and Cultures. And if you go and take a look at that, I've pulled a lot of my previous conferences together on that site, and I'm publishing a number of Sense and Adapt approaches. The Sense and Adapt Academy is really about accelerating wisdom. It's not a framework. It's about helping people determine what is the right course of action in whatever situation they find themselves, rather than jumping to some method or other. It's about wisdom, and that's what we talk about. It's about truly, as a person, is sensing and adapting to the situation, and to do that you need wisdom and you need education. So that's what the Sense and Adapt Academy is about. If you go into the YouTube page, look out for, there's a 3-part video there called The Chameleon Effect. I particularly like that because it's short and sweet. It's in 3 parts, and the center part is talking about purpose as well. And the other 2 talk about how adaptive organizations work. They're very short. So that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. I will put the link to all of those on the show notes, make sure that people can easily find those. And of course, also Stephen Parry's, aka Lean Voices, Twitter and LinkedIn pages, so that people can interact with Stephen. Stephen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you very much.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.